What's up, guys, and welcome to One Take. I'm Gil, and today we're talking about Raised by Wolves, Season 2, Episode 3, titled Good Creatures. This will be a full recap and review, so it's gonna be full of spoilers, and let's get right into it. In her search for the serpent, Mother runs into Father and his gaggle of Mithraic. She tries to convince him that their sacrifice is unnecessary, but he's not convinced she alone can or will kill the serpent, so he insists on continuing. She also wonders if she should be destroyed. She feels guilt and shame over creating the beast, but Father assures her that she is good, and they part ways to continue the hunt. Then they run into Marcus and his recently acquired tank. Marcus asks Father to let his friends go and points out, between the range on the bombs and the staff, Father will be killed in the explosion too. It's a sacrifice Father is willing to make, but as Marcus points out, it's a choice the Trust made for him. Marcus offers to set Father free, and Father's response is to fight. But Marcus seems extra strong and impervious to the staff's energy attack. So Marcus wins the fight, and I've lost count. This is the third time Father's died, I think. So during all this, we see the dark veins on Marcus's face pulsating. Clearly, the eye Lucius force-fed him has enhanced Marcus's strength. Similar to Otho the prisoner last season, siphoning Mother's blood into his own body. I have a lot of questions about this. When Lucius force-fed Marcus the eye, I have to think he wasn't trying to help. He probably thought it would kill Marcus, and if he thought that, it must be a maneuver he's seen or done before. So that eye should have killed him. Why didn't it? Is it possible the intelligence on the planet is behind it? Maybe it was able to stave off the radiation, which should poison Marcus to death. So instead, Marcus can enjoy all the benefits of the necromancer stuff inside him without the part that would normally kill a human. So although Marcus felt abandoned by the intelligence last season, it seems it still sees a use for him. What exactly is that use? We'll see. Marcus frees the Mithraic from their bomb straps, then invites them to his new congregation. They all join, except Lucius, who still holds a grudge against Marcus. Elsewhere, remember last episode, the android Vril asked for Paul and Campion's help? She directs them to the cave where Marcus is starting his new congregation, though Paul and Campion don't know that yet. Paul is shocked at the Sol Invictus, while Vril heals herself and Campion gets to know her a little. There's a question of, does she really have the same thoughts and feelings as the real, deceased Vril, or is she just mimicking? It's an age-old question in science fiction. Is an advanced computer really conscious, or just really good at faking it? And what's the difference? You could argue that the human brain is just a really advanced computer. Something to ponder and keep you up at night, if Wordle isn't already doing that. Then Paul spots a golden scalpel, which he recognizes, and Vril confirms they are in Marcus's Cathedral. Paul asks Vril to lie and not tell anyone they were there. Then he and Campion run, but they're forced to hide when Marcus and the Mithraic arrive. Meanwhile, Mother finds an invisible trap the atheists set to catch the serpent, and she springs it, saying it wouldn't have worked and would have just made the creature angrier. Cleaver is very upset by this, but the Trust orders him to let her go and accompany her up the mountain. By the way, I am on Father's side here. I think Mother's judgment is clouded. I don't think she sprang the trap because it would have made the creature angry. I think she is subconsciously trying to protect it. I think she believes she's trying to kill it, but she's experiencing emotions that she is unsure how to process. And those emotions are guiding her to protect the serpent, even if she doesn't realize it. As they make their ascent, Mother asks Cleaver why he doesn't get his eyes fixed, and asks they belong to someone else, didn't they? My interpretation of that line is that Cleaver was probably wounded or suffered some affliction that lost him his eyesight or his actual eyes. So he got an organ transplant, new eyes, maybe from a family member or a loved one, and now they hold a sort of sentimental value, so he doesn't want to modify them out of some kind of respect. I'm intrigued by this, less about the specific question about his eyes, and more just to learn more about Cleaver as a human. Though you've probably noticed that's a running theme for me. In general, I want to know more about these human characters and what makes them tick. They hear the serpent, and Mother leaves Cleaver behind to reach the top of the mountain, where she finds the serpent. She points her gun and puts it down. Then she catches a bird, rips its head off, and tries to feed it to her child. But the serpent refuses. Instead, it eats some plants, revealing that it's an herbivore. This was a pretty powerful moment, and I'm glad the CGI was as strong as it was. Amanda Collin did a great job between the pain knowing she needs to kill her child and the relief that maybe she doesn't. And that could have been undercut if the CGI was cheesy, but I thought it looked great. Father wakes up, once again resurrected, and is shocked to learn Mother did not kill the serpent and has instead brought it home to care for it. He storms off to the cave where Mother's keeping it, and she defends herself. She claims that she tested the serpent's scales and it cannot withstand acid water, meaning something else killed those people, the ones who were dragged into the water last episode. Father also makes a good point. Mother herself claimed she was manipulated into birthing the serpent. The animal is a parasite, not a child. Father storms off, back to his pet project, resurrecting the ancient android. Like I said, I agree with Father, but the serpent does seem fairly harmless, especially if it's not the one that killed those people. So how do we explain that? Well, I don't think the serpent is here to just kill people and wreak havoc. Whatever it's meant to do may be a little more complicated, and maybe right now, part of the plan is for the serpent to gain the humans' trust, so it can exist among them and continue to grow more powerful. I suspect part of that has to do with giving the intelligence more power. We know it has limitations. Its signal cannot reach the tropical zone. Perhaps as the serpent grows stronger, if Campion keeps feeding it pumpkins, it will act almost like an antenna or Wi-Fi booster, giving the intelligence access to the tropical zone. Campion hints at that later when he tells Mother about the serpent. He says, "I keep on thinking it's in touch with something." And maybe as the serpent grows, it will give the intelligence more power in other ways, like an ability to directly interact with the physical world, rather than having to use people like pawns, manipulating Mother, Marcus, Paul, Campion, Otho, etc. So Father works on the ancient android and notices that his blood seems to feed it. And he says, "It seems Mother's not the only one capable of creating life." And inside, we see the android's core light up for a second, a strong hint that at some point it will truly come to life. I've said repeatedly that my favorite part of this show is Mother and Father's evolution. This is a good example of that. Both are experiencing emotions they don't fully understand, and that doesn't just manifest as watching two people struggle with emotions, but it also guides the two characters to take actions with real consequences. Mother's guilt, shame, and implicit love for her child maybe clouds her judgment when it comes to number 7. Maybe that's why she let the serpent live. And I think here, we're seeing Father's jealousy. Mother is far more powerful than him, and now he sees that he can do something which before only she could do. He gets to create life. Should he bring this android back to life? Is that a good idea? It seems his emotion is driving him to bypass that question entirely and just do it. Which is good for us because I really want to hear what that android has to say. Though I'm also a bit terrified of it. If you've seen Prometheus, this gives me the same feeling of those characters trying to find the engineers. You think you want to talk to your ancient creators, but it might not go the way you hope. Elsewhere, Sue is ordered to analyze samples from the serpent. When she hesitates, loud noises and blinking red lights push her to get moving. Looking at the sample, she finds its nanobot count is low. It's still developing, which I alluded to earlier. I think the serpent is going to keep growing more and more powerful. Sue also learns that the creature is only 6 months old and has something similar to Mother's milk in its stomach. It's easy to forget that it's not common knowledge that the serpent is Mother's child. This here is Sue starting to realize that. At the cave, Mother and Campion talk near the serpent, And we get that line I mentioned earlier, where Campion thinks the Serpent is in touch with something. The Serpent appears to get jealous of Mother's attention to Campion, and Mother gives the Serpent a worried or maybe a skeptical look. What we saw there might be jealousy, like Campion and Mother think, or it might be something even more sinister. I think this Serpent is basically an appendage of the intelligence. And that intelligence wanted Mother to break her link with humanity. I think that's why it wanted Campion to kill himself. So maybe the look the Serpent gave was less jealousy and more, I need to figure out how to break this mother-son relationship. Meanwhile, Cleaver takes Paul to see the Trust. The computer interrogates Paul, essentially threatening Mouse unless Paul tells the truth. The Trust wants to know if Paul has been in contact with Marcus, and if Paul really wants Marcus dead. Paul claims that he hates Marcus and hasn't seen him, so the Trust gives Mouse back and assures Paul he won't have to worry about Marcus much longer. They're going to commence a search and destroy mission in 24 hours. We know Paul is lying here, not just about seeing Marcus, but also about wanting him dead. He told Campion earlier they need to keep Marcus a secret because right now, Marcus is the only one carrying on the Mithraic faith. At the cave or the cathedral, Marcus finds what I believe is some of the serpent's skin, that it shed like a snake. And he seems very happy to have found it. He kind of holds it like a cape. Back at Mother's home, Paul notes that Mouse is acting weird, and Holly suggests it was probably brain-chipped and being controlled by the Trust. It almost seems like they're trying to get us used to the idea of animals being controlled by computers. I wonder why. And I'm talking about the Serpent here, of course. Like I said, I think the Serpent will be revealed as a way for the intelligence to interact with the physical world, controlling it like the Trust may be controlling Mouse. After that, pretty much everyone starts working on their own little secret projects. Paul convinces Campion and Holly to go to Marcus and warn him about the upcoming search and destroy mission. Father continues to feed the ancient android, who is slowly looking more and more alive. He teams up with Hunter to go find more fuel blood to help complete that project. And very important moment here. Hunter asks Father about the joke he never got to finish last season. If you recall, after Father was reprogrammed by the Mithraic, Hunter was able to reprogram him back to normal. And the first thing Father did when he woke up was start to tell a joke. An android, a black hole, and a glass of milk walk into a bar. But Father was interrupted by Marcus before he could get to the punchline. So here Hunter asks him about it, and Father says he's saving it. Now, I looked back at my reviews from last season to see if I had any theories on the punchline. The closest I came was just that the punchline may include the phrase Milky Way galaxy in some sort of a space pun. Anyway, they head to an atheist settlement by the Tarantula where they store the fuel blood. They try to trade for it, but the only thing which catches the trader's eye is Hunter's Saul pendant. But Father stops Hunter from giving it away. Important to note here that Hunter was willing to give up the pendant for Father, and it's unclear how much Father told him between the scenes, but even if Hunter is aware the fuel blood will be used for the ancient android, it seems like Hunter was mostly willing to give up the pendant just because he knew it would help Father. So there is a real friendship forming here, which I'm really enjoying, especially for the conflict it may lead to. Father fights for the atheist cause with even more fervor than Mother, and Hunter is one of the more devout of the Mithraic. Will that become a problem at some point? I've got to think that it probably will. So, with Hunter's pendant off the table, they make a new trade. In exchange for the fuel blood, Father will fight Billy, a sort of monster robot that the atheists built. And he's going to fight him purely for their entertainment, like watching a gladiator match. Before the fight, they bump into Tempest, who's made a new atheist friend, and Hunter gives Father his Saul pendant before sending him into battle. I thought this was a fun scene. This show can be pretty bleak at times, so this was definitely some welcome levity. You've got Hunter and Tempest cheering Father on, and Father having to be clever to defeat a, on the surface, more powerful foe. But Father's got something that Billy doesn't: brains. So he outsmarts the monster and disables it, and much like Rocky in Rocky IV, he wins over what was initially a hostile crowd. Also, the name Billy sounded familiar, specifically in the context of AI, and then it hit me. When I was about 10 years old, I talked to a robot named Billy. So there was a project in 1999 called the Billy Project to create an AI in the form of a chat program. So when I was a kid, I used to talk to Billy. Anybody could sign on to the website, download the program, and talk to the AI. And I think Billy is still functioning, so I'll put a link in a pinned comment if you want to try and talk to Billy yourself. Anyway, I don't know if that was an intentional reference, but feels pretty coincidental for a show so focused on AI. Meanwhile, Paul, Campion, and Holly find Marcus's settlement. They spy from a distance, and Campion starts to get cold feet. Maybe they shouldn't do this. What they witness is Marcus hanging on to that serpent skin, which apparently retains heat, so he can draw on Saul's power even at night, and he kisses Decima, so apparently they've grown closer. Then Marcus spots Paul, and the three of them come out from hiding. Paul and Marcus reunite, and that's where the episode ends. This reunion is one I'm pretty excited for, especially if Marcus, Paul, and Campion actually talk, because they've all had very different experiences with the intelligence. It told Campion to kill himself, it seemed to be a god to Marcus and Paul, so I'm wondering how they're going to reconcile that. And how will Paul reconcile with the knowledge that Marcus killed his father, yet Marcus is also their only hope, really, of continuing the Mithraic faith? So I'm very interested to see how that reunion goes. And overall, I thought this was a solid episode. It didn't have quite the same excitement of the first two, discovering this new atheist world, but there was a lot of pretty exciting setup. The Serpent is now in the encampment, Paul is with Marcus, and Father should be getting the fuel blood he needs to resurrect his android. Those are all threads I'm pretty excited to follow. Also, we can't forget about Lucius. It's hard to imagine what he thinks he can accomplish on his own, so maybe he goes back to the atheists and tries to negotiate. He does have a bargaining chip. He's got info on the terrorist, Marcus. So that's a possibility. Either way, I think he's gotta either go back to Marcus or back to the atheists. So we'll see. Anyway, let's wrap it up there. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more. Also, make sure to leave your thoughts in the comments to join in the conversation. With that, thank you for watching, and see you on the next One Take.